Welcome back to another episode of The Shack Show, and in this episode of The Shack Show, I'm going to talk about fish breaking the rules, more specifically, bass breaking the rules in one particular way, and that one particular way is hot water. So I've talked a lot about water temps in past videos, and I've talked about how water temperature is super important. It is one of the main ways that I try to figure out a way to target my bigger bass, especially when I'm fishing in new areas. What I try to do is find a time of year where that water temperature is generally between like 65, maybe a little warmer, maybe like 68 to 70 degrees is kind of like prime time temperature. And what I'll try to do is I will fish the spots, whether it being in the early spring in the estuaries or off the rocks in maybe late summer, or back in the estuaries in late fall. The trying to find water temperature that is warmer is a huge part of what I do when I'm targeting big bass. So what I like to do is I use a few different sources. I like to use the NOAA buoys to figure out what the water temperature is. There's a good app I use called Water Temp, and I have it on my iPhone, and that will pull the water temperatures from the NOAA buoys, and I'm able to see kind of what it is. In other ways you can do it is actually bringing like a thermometer with you, and you're able to stick that in the water and see what temperature the water is. I've done that a lot as well, and I've been able to find a good measure of the water temperature, but you will drive yourself crazy because you can go from one cove to the next and there can be a 5 to 10 degree water temperature difference, all depending on wind direction and everything that's going on like that. Currents will also bring different water temperatures. So it's never really an exact science, but ballparking it, if you're within that 68 to 70 degree water temperature, you're generally in a good zone. So what I like to do is, for the most part, pick a spot that's in that temperature range, and I'll tend to have a better shot at catching big fish. And for the most part, that's true, but there are certain areas and at certain times of the year where I'll be fishing places where the water temperature will be in the high 70s, and there'll be tons of really big bass there. And now you have to ask yourself why. And the one big thing that I've seen break the rules when it comes to warm water is places where there is a lot of bait. If the bass are keyed in on some sort of bait and the water temperature in that area is really high or maybe really cold, depending on the time of the year, the bass will move into those areas to feed. So one time this happened to me, I was talking to somebody about a certain spot, and there's a lot of sand eels there, and I was like, man, I think that would probably be a good spot to fish. I've been seeing a lot of blitzes and on these sand eels, but who knows, because the water temperature there's got to be in the high 70s. And sure enough, that spot ended up being very productive later in the season, even when the water temperatures were in the high 70s, and there's tons of really big bass there. So when you are looking at spots and you are trying to follow like rules of thumb and different ways that you can maximize your opportunity and your chance to run into a big fish, water temperature is definitely something that I will highly suggest to look at. But never let it be the overarching reason why you won't fish a spot. Because there are certain areas where if there's a lot of bait around or you see a lot of fish activity, that there could be a lot of really big bass there. And don't let all these rules, mess with your head and be like, okay, because it's like this, I don't want to fish there. And a lot of the time we talk about this with other things like, oh, maybe you can't fish a certain plug during the day, or who knows, like there's lots of different things like that where there's rules that might get in your way of you trying something that you think might work. And I never want to be like, because I do say a lot of these rules of thumb where it's like, well, you are more likely to catch a big bass at night here, or maybe you're more likely to catch a big bass when the wind is blowing onshore, but maybe it's an offshore wind that works well for this spot for some reason. So for all those rules of thumbs that, maybe me or other people talk about or write about, there's always going to be those places where it doesn't matter what the bass should do. They'll do what they will do what they want to do for some reason that maybe is unexplainable, but they might do it. So always try to make your own, like, it's always good to follow rules of thumb, but don't ever be afraid to break those rules and try to fish in new, different ways, because sometimes you'll be surprised, and sometimes the big bass will be in that area regardless. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please give it a like, and if you could subscribe, that would really help me out, and I'll see you next time.